Hi friends, this is MawdiayFaith again with Fearful's Journey Through the Desert. I thought we could do in chapter 3 together. I think with the time I have we will only get to do part of it, but hopefully we can get a lot done. If you are just joining me, I have the introduction of Fearful's Journey Through the Desert and part 1 of chapter 1 and part 2 of chapter 1 and then chapter 2 itself in different videos, and I'll leave the links in the comments below, so check those out. If you haven't been with us before, I would love it if you join us on the Fearful's Journey Through the Desert with us. It's a good book, so I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 3. Prince Anointed One took her by the hand and led her out from the oasis's protection. Out of the ring of trees stood a beautiful chestnut horse with a black mane and tail. The mare shook her head with whinnying. Fearful resisted the leading of Prince Anointed One toward the horse. Last time she was on a horse, she was thrown off. She never trusted horses since then. Do you trust horses? I'm not sure that I trust horses. Let's see what happens. Come on. Chestnut is as gentle as a dove. Fearful hesitantly let herself be lifted up onto the horse. She hung onto the saddle's horn so tightly that her knuckles started turning white, and they screamed to be allowed to let go. Her terror would not permit it. She held her breath, fighting the oncoming panic. She had imagined she had seen an evil glint in the horse's eye, and her mind went through all the things a horse could do to a person. Would you be scared of going on a horse? I get scared of going on horses. Relax. I won't let you fall, came a whisper into her ear as a strong arm slipped around her middle. The strength that radiated from Prince Anointed One's whole body was overwhelming. He could have squeezed her like a cobra if he had wanted to, and yet love seemed to be blended with his strength. Now, I believe you wanted to ask me some questions. Fearful felt awkward at being put on the spot and bit her lip, not knowing what to say. Have you ever been put on the spot about your questions and not known what to say? I know that feeling. A lot of my students get that feeling when I ask them questions about what we're doing in class. It happens. It's okay. Fearful was feeling more and more awkward and embarrassed. Why are you like this? Kind, loving, and everything else to me. I'm just a slave. Close your eyes and put your arms out like you're a bird, Prince Anointed One whispered. Fearful turned around to look at him as though he were mad. Her hazel eyes got getting bigger than they naturally were. Trust me, I won't let you go. His eyes told Fearful that that was a promise he would keep. So scared as she was, she let go of the saddle horn and slowly raised her arms. Then, taking a deep breath and holding it, she closed her eyes. Once her eyes were closed, all her fears blew away with the wind. It felt like she was flying. The urgent feeling that had started to rise within her last night seemed to be somewhat appeased with that ride, and yet it also was like it was becoming more desperate, a compelling longing to be totally satisfied. Little Rose, I want to be able to give you this feeling for every day of your life. I want you to be free. I want you to be free from all your fears and worries, Prince Anointed One whispered into Fearful's ear, and then let her just revel in the moment. After they had been riding that way for several minutes, Prince Anointed One's gentle voice broke through her rapture. Okay, now open your eyes. We're at the place I wanted to show you. See that shepherd? What do you suppose his feelings are for his sheep? Fearful found that they were no longer in the desert, but in a luscious meadow with green grass and a laughing brook flowing through it. By the brook stood an old knobby tree, and under it sat a shepherd playing a harp. His flock was spread out in front of him. Fearful finally answered with a smile. He loves his sheep dearly and would protect them with his life. Do you have a pet you would love dearly? Excellent observation, Prince Anointed One said as he turned the horse around. That is how I feel about you, little Rose. That is why I'm kind and became a servant. I love you. Fearful's heart was pounding at these words. She, Fearful, being loved in such a way, was that even possible? She could hardly believe what she was hearing. How could this be? How could a prince love her, a servant without a drop of royal blood? They now were going slower, and Fearful looked around. They were going through a canyon with mountains rising sharply on both sides of them. When they came out on the other side, the desert spread out before them, flat and practically featureless. Here and there was an occasional cactus or a rock with a lizard sunbathing. The sky was the only thing with vibrant color. It was so blue and beautiful. Everything was so safe-feeling that Fearful began to doze. As she entered the dream world, she saw Prideful, Boastful, and Scaredy Cat. She called to them, saying, I've so much to tell you about Prince Anointed One. What's your problem? Fearful realized her friends were ignoring her. They didn't even look up from their weeding. Why? They had always listened. They had always lent a friendly ear. Fearful was confused and hurt by the cold silence. Why do you think her friends are being so cold and not listening to her? Let's find out. I think I need a drink first. Traitor! How dare you leave the master who clothed and fed you, you ingrate! Fearful looked at Prideful in total confusion. Prideful, you know as well as anyone else that Prince Iniquity is a hateful, cruel tyrant. All of a sudden, her friends, Granny, and all the slaves in Prince Iniquity's garden started surrounding her and shouting, Traitor! 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 A sharp pain of hurt and loneliness struck her square in the chest. Fearful looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. Why were all her friends against her? It was like they thought she was the hateful, cruel person. A groan from the depths of her being left her lips, for she was totally crushed. Oh, her own friends, whom she loved, had turned against her. No, she wailed as her heart shattered. She wanted that overwhelming sense of everything being all right and being loved, but she also wanted the feeling of belonging with friends. Tears ran down her tan cheeks as she looked around at the angry crowd, searching for just one friendly face. Fearful found Scaredy Cat standing quietly off to the side, looking on sadly. Fearful reached out her hand pleadingly, but Scaredy Cat just turned away and went back to work. This act was even worse than the angry chanting. She covered her tear-streaked face with her hands. It was too much. Fearful woke up sobbing. Oh. Little Rose, wake up. Prince Anointed One's voice broke into her dream. Fearful woke up sobbing. Oh, is that really how my friends will react toward me if I decide to make you my master? Prince Anointed One looked down at her sadly. I'm afraid so. Even those closest to me? Yes, they will treat you horribly. Prince Anointed One seemed to know what she had been dreaming. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Can't any of them see how terrible Prince Iniquity is? Some of them can, but are too scared to see that there's a way out. Others are just so blind that they wouldn't know what wickedness was if they... Wouldn't know what wickedness was if it were to box them in the ears. Prince Anointed One set Fearful down on her own 2 feet. They were back at camp, and it was way past dark. As Fearful stood there, she noticed As Fearful stood there, she noticed a delicious smell hanging in the air and the crackling of the fire. "Good, you're back in time for the evening meal," Ambassador of Trust said, stirring whatever was in the pot. At the mention of food, Fearful for the first time since breakfast noticed that her stomach was grumbling loudly. She hadn't eaten since then. Even though she was famished, she couldn't enjoy the food. She was trapped deeply in thought about her dream. Those angry faces of Prideful and Boastful, that sad and hurt face of Scaredy Cat's, were seared into her mind. She couldn't block out the sound of their voices. Did she really want to risk that? Later that night, when her father was keeping watch, Fearful went out to sit with him. She had tossed and turned, but was unable to stop thinking about her nightmare. She needed his comforting presence. "Do you know how much you remind me of your mother? Your mother used to always get that faraway look when she didn't want to think about something, but it wouldn't leave her in peace. What's on your mind?" Ambassador of Trust whispered, starting to rub Fearful's back. "What's peace?" "It is the feeling that everything will be all right, even though it doesn't look that way." Fearful looked up at the pitch-black sky for a moment, wondering how to tell her thoughts. "I had a dream while riding back here. I was back in Prince Iniquity's garden, telling the girls how wonderful Prince Anointed One was, when all of a sudden they all started yelling traitor at me. Scaredy Cat wasn't yelling. She simply gave me a cold shoulder, which was even worse. I don't want to lose my friends. They were the only ones who loved and understood me, other than Grandpa, Grandma, and Mother, but they're dead now. Yet I can't express the love I feel flowing from Prince Anointed One. Is that real, or are my emotions tricking me into feeling something that's not there?" Fearful looked over at her father, longing for an answer. She wanted something that would put her heart to ease. Did she want to risk losing her friendships for one that she wasn't sure was real? Was he lying to her? Deep down inside, she hoped not. Yet she was scared to find out. What if deep down lurked someone worse than Prince Iniquity? Was that even possible? If it was, Fearful didn't want to be the one to find out. What do you think? Do you think Prince Anointed One is as kind as he seems? Or is he a mean monster worse than Prince Iniquity? What do you think? Leave your comments down in the comments below, please. Let's keep reading. Little Rose, I could tell you all I know, and the sinful nature in you would keep making excuses. You're going to have to see this one through by yourself, but I'll be there by your side. Fearful arose and went to bed, disappointed. How was she supposed to find the answers she wanted on her own? That seemed to be impossible. She fell asleep quickly, but was haunted with evil nightmares. Have you ever had evil nightmares? I have. They're no fun. Fearful woke up screaming, drenched in a cold sweat. It was so dark she couldn't see her hand in front of her face, but she could feel herself quaking. A tangible sense of evil filled the tent. It was almost like she could feel Prince Iniquity breathing down her back. Yet she could hear her father snoring peacefully beside her. "Little Rose, come out here," Prince Anointed One called quietly from the fire ring. Fearful got up, slowly slipping on her sandals. She pushed the flap away and walked out into the flickering light of the fire. "Yes, sir?" Fearful asked, standing across the fire from him. "Come sit by my side," Prince Anointed One motioned. Fearful sat down on the edge of the log, somewhat scared of what he wanted. "Now, what was that scream of terror in the dark?" Frightened of telling the truth, she answered with a different question. "What happens after death?" "It depends on who your master is. If you belong to King Holy One, you go into our palace, and all discomforts disappear, and you no longer have worldly worries. Your trouble will be worse than you have ever imagined or experienced if Prince Iniquity is your master. Now, what was your dream?" Fearful looked into Prince Anointed One's brown eyes, surprised. Fearful hesitated. She decided to try to trust him in this. So she began to tell the whole horrid dream. She felt better after telling the nightmare, and then felt an assuring hand on her shoulder. Fearful looked up, and to her surprise, the sun was starting to peek its head out from the edge of the world, giving some of its brilliant light. It was the most beautiful sunrise Fearful had ever seen, with vivid purples, golds, and blues. It took her breath away. "Come on, I bet you can't catch me." With that, Prince Anointed One gently pushed her off the log and started running. Fearful, who was shocked, stood dumbfounded, but then she started after him with a smile. Prince Anointed One and Fearful raced around after each other, laughing for a long time. After about half an hour, they tumbled up to the ground beside each other. They were laughing so hard they could hardly breathe. Well, friends, that is part 1 of chapter 3. I have to go because I have a class coming in soon. But I hope you enjoyed that first part of chapter 3. Leave your comments in the comments below so I can know what parts of the story you're enjoying. I hope you have lots of questions. Put them in the comments below and maybe we can discuss them. Bye. God bless.